Our next guest, Mr. Bohdan Ferens, candidate of political science, founder of the public organization SD Platform. Hello, Mr. Ferens. Hello, Bohdan.
Yeah, good afternoon.
My first question. Ukraine enjoys to have many partners and allies and friends worldwide. But if you look at the map of the world society closely, there's still many countries that are, well, so to speak, hesitatingly silent. They do not support the Russian Federation openly, however, do not condemn it and do not cut ties with it. So the voices of these countries, offering what they call alternatives to Zelensky's peace formula, the voices on the world's political arena, how loud they are, and could it come to the point that these voices will be sounding louder than the voice of the country that actually is fighting for freedom, Ukraine? Do you think?
I think that, we have different, geographical paths.
Right.
It means that every country just has their own interests. And unfortunately, also we can just observe that some big powers like China, for example, like India, they are still continuing cooperating with Russia. But at the same time, they are just also quite interested in further cooperation with the Western countries, with the US. That's why in this context, we, as Ukrainians, we have to fight for every just country, every nation, every political force in these countries, because it means that now Russians are trying to push more harder these propaganda narratives, and I'm trying to follow the internal media in China, in India, for example, in some other countries from the global south, and unfortunately, they're quite often just targeting different audiences and politicians. That's why I think that it's quite not so easy to just change the position of these countries, such as China, India, Indonesia, maybe Brazil, by the way, from Latin America. But at the same time, they could be quite interested in finding some solutions in the context of nuclear safety, of ecological issues, on product safety. That's why we need to somehow also deepen our cooperation in these countries and leaders.
Thanks a lot for this answer. But let us talk for more action. I mean, what is that Ukrainian diplomacy can and should do in order to persuade the countries that had chosen, I don't know how to call it, let's call it neutrality, to support Ukraine finally and condemn Russia, because Russia is a perpetrator of the crime of aggression and there can't be no neutrality. So what do we do as a society, as a Ukrainian diplomacy? If that would be for you to decide, what would you do?
I would just start from more deeper understanding in internal just context, and internal political actors. The first point that I want to mention. The second point is that we need to be more active at different levels of formal diplomacy and informal diplomacy. I'm a fan of informal diplomacy. I believe that inter-party, for example, diplomacy could be and must be sometimes much more influential. But at the same time, it's necessary also to understand that we have some also limitation. For example, in targeting some political forces or politicians. That's why we can use the channels of the influence for our partners, For example, when with some countries, for example, we don't have or didn't have such a deep economical relationships, and we are not maybe so important for this. For some countries, we can just, and we should take into account that US or Western markets could be more interested for such a countries, and using this our cooperation we can just target it some other politicians. But at the same time also Africa, now we are just more active in this region. The region is very just unique, I think, in the context of different countries with different level of cooperation with US, West, and Russia. But at the same time, I hope that we truly understand that now we are fighting, as I mentioned, for each country.
Soviet Union had ties with Africa. Yes, Soviet Union indeed. But Russia is not the Soviet Union in terms of power and in terms of political influence. They may be striking a pose, but they can't do it. But what if what if Ukrainian diplomacy just let them play the game until they make a mistake? Maybe that's the way, because they are all about the past. They think that they can, I don't know, reinstate Soviet Union, but they can't. But the African countries, why Ukraine needs the loyalty of African countries? Can you explain, like say, in three steps, just for my audience, please?
Yeah, okay. The first step is a big region, and a lot of countries just also influence somehow on the global agenda. You know, the worst of global south is much more visible now and hearable. That's why I think we have to just work with this topic. The second point is that Russia, unfortunately, is still so active in this region, and China also. And we will see more challenges in the context of these geopolitical clashes between these powers. And the third point is that a lot of African countries are really dependent on our grain, and it means that we have this common interest, and it means that we also can just work with this. Deepen our cooperation, trying to just share some arguments why global South should be more on the side of Ukraine, not like on the neutral position. But at the same time, it is a long-term, I think, process, not like a fast track.
Okay, you mentioned China. This November, Chinese leader Xi Jinping will meet Joe Biden in the United States of America. American newspapers write that the countries want to improve diplomatic relations. What shall we all expect? How will Beijing's policy towards Ukraine and Russia can possibly change after that, if you have any ideas?
I'm not sure that the Beijing policy will change on Ukraine after this meeting, because they are trying to use this kind of situation in global area to just promote their own interest. And for their own interest, for example, the tactical cooperation with weakening Russia is quite a priority, you know, in opposing the Western countries and the US. But at the same time, I think this visit could be quite resultive in the context of the US election. And for Biden personally, it is quite also useful to show the voters that, okay, I am the guy who are just trying to work with this difficult situation with Taiwan, with Russian war, and so on. But as I mentioned, I don't expect such a big changes after this meeting in the context of the position of China on Russian war in Ukraine.
Is there anything we can do, we as the world united around Ukraine and Ukraine as the center of the world's diplomacy, because this is the fact now, to change China's attitude towards Ukraine, or maybe to change China's attitude towards Russia?
From a realistical point of view, I'm a fan of this kind of approach. The main aim now, for global West, just to avoid China to be involved in deeper military cooperation with Russia. I think it is the main target for now, and it is a big threat. This kind of diplomacy and understanding for China, Western market was and still is a priority. You know, that's why I think, from my perspective, that for China during this period of global processes, the clever approach is not to be involved in military cooperation with Russia. Maybe in the future they will change this in the new contexts. But for now, we see that maybe they are cooperating somehow through the North Korea, who knows? But at the same time, openly, I think they are trying to avoid this because they think that without sanctions from West for their economy, for their interest, it's much more better to walk.
Or maybe Xi Jinping is not the only leader of China, and we should be able to reach to some other powers that are ready to take his place, because who knows? But anyway, your advice...
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. There's no sure.
Term, yeah,
there's no sure thing about anything in the world these days. But maybe, I mean, we have to be realistic about it. If we can't change Xi Jinping's attitude to Ukraine, that doesn't mean that we can't influence Chinese people's attitude towards Ukraine, because I have friends in China, in Beijing, and I know what I'm talking about. But this is a hard issue. But it doesn't mean we don't have to address it, just forget about it. Exactly, we have to keep our diplomacy, and we have to be looking for new ways. And maybe the new power in China is also a possibility for Ukrainian diplomacy. You know, I'm just picking a question, that's it, nothing else.